Hello, People for Liberty. My name is Dan Fishman. You are on the People for Liberty Lunch Power Hour. We're here to talk about current issues in the country, current issues in the world, liberty, which is a pervasive topic. And we're here to talk about it with people who are leaders in our movement, people who have fought the fight, people who have experienced restrictions upon liberty. And today, my special guest is a man named Ricky HArrington. Ricky, thanks so much for joining us on the show. So let's tell people a little bit about you who may not know. You're not just a liberty advocate. You walked the walk. You ran for office last year. What office did you run for?
Ran for the United States Senate, representing the state of Arkansas.
The state of Arkansas. And who was your opponent?
Tom Cotton.
Tom Cotton. One of the classics of really small-minded thought. Because as I recall, there was a point in time, there's a thing called the 1619 Project, where they want to teach the history of slavery in the United States. And Tom Cotton opposed teaching that, right?
Yes. He had some fight with the New York Times after he called for the use of the 82nd Airborne and American troops deployed against American citizens. And so it was a little tit for tat on that end. Surely he was above that.
You would think so. And to put it in context to him, because today is, of course, Martin Luther King Day, didn't used to be a holiday in this country. And in fact, there was opposition to making Martin Luther King Day a national holiday.
I remember the bomb threats at school on Martin Luther King Day.
Did you grow up in Arkansas?
I grew up in East Texas.
East Texas. Not also a hotbed of acceptance at that point in time. So, and I remember well, especially in Arizona, the governor at the time, Evan Meacham, who specifically fought against having Martin Luther King Day be a holiday. And the NFL, which has been less than courageous at times, got involved, and they said, you know what? You guys are supposed to host the Super Bowl next year. Well, we're not having a Super Bowl in a state that doesn't recognize a federal holiday for Martin Luther King Day. And it was interesting because that sort of nascent activism, we're seeing more of that now, right? I mean, I think about the athletes getting involved now, and it's a different, bigger movement than it was 2 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about a couple things when we talk about Dr. King and his philosophy. One of the things that I want to do is I want to share a video of Dr. King. Let me make sure I get the right one. And this is it. And would share one of his speeches. This is actually the last speech that he gave. It was the day before he was assassinated. And this is the ending of that speech. Let me bring it in here.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, We aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Oh, I can't hear you, Mr. Fishman.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I keep muting myself when I put videos on. I am always overwhelmed every time I see that clip, because obviously the content is incredibly powerful, even if you didn't know that he was going to be assassinated the next day.
Yeah, the context is definitely even more powerful.
It is. But I want to talk about a couple things that he says there, and then talk about, what happened on what I am referring to as December 37th, because that way I can say that everything terrible happened in 2020. But he says, I've heard of the right to assembly, freedom of speech, and one of the greatest things about America is the right to protest. And I agree with him 100%. But what happened a week ago Wednesday, now almost 2 weeks ago, that wasn't a protest. It might have started off as one, but it changed. Can you talk about how it changed, what your perception was? Where were you Wednesday last when you first heard that things are going crazy?
Well, I was with my children, kind of working with them, doing some of their schoolwork, and keeping up with what was going on in real time. And I guess I could say that it didn't really shock me, because there were some people that I've been, friends with for a long time that were Trump supporters, that were talking about there's going to be some things happening. And so you kind of have to, okay, is this just hyperbole here, or is this someone telling me or telling a lot of other people that the Patriots are going to be doing something spectacular in support of the president? One thought that I do have is that if people are going to protest, if people are going to stand for something, that it should be for the ideals and principles that are on paper, as Dr. King said in his last speech, not for any man. No one should ever give out a call to arms for a man, because that is the antithesis of our style of government, which is a separation of powers, which is a government where everyone has the chance to have a voice in the governance of this country, not just a party, not just a corporate interest or other special interest groups, or any sort of thing that can coalesce the power into the hands of a small group of people. That's not the system that we have. So I saw that as an affront to that idea that we have. Of course, support who you want to support, but don't go to that extent for a person if it breaks or corrodes the principles that we have as a nation.
So it's interesting to say that. And you said that you were friends with some Trump supporters, but in your in your occupation, which is also your calling, you are a chaplain working in American prisons. So I am guessing that you have seen real white supremacy movements.
Yes, there was a month of my life while I was working at Cummins where I was having a struggle with a white supremacist gang um, at the prison there. I was overseeing a program called Think Legacy, and it essentially prepares people to re-enter society. And so only certain type of inmates can be in this program here, which is someone that's 6 to 18 months away from their TE date or their parole date or the eligibility of parole. And so I found out that there was a major and a captain in a particular white supremacist gang that was in the program, and I had to kick them out. If you understand what a major and a captain is in these gangs, a major is the highest person in this gang, and a captain is just right under him. And so I had to call these two men in my office, and there was only one exit and one way to come in that office. I was in there by myself with this major and the captain in this white supremacist gang, and I had to look them in their face and tell them, I can't have you in this barracks here recruiting people into your gangs and doing business. So, this is very real. It's not a figment of people's imagination. And racism is magnified to a greater level in the penitentiary than it is in the free world. Um, and we still have a lot of work to do. And this is what I want to say right now. Whenever we talk about this issue of race, and if when we talk about it, you have feelings of okay, you start to feel uncomfortable. You start to feel like this is a personal attack against you because you happen to be Caucasian. That's not the case. First off, you should ask yourself, why do I feel this way whenever a person of color starts talking to me about their experience of racism or the difficulties that they face? And once a person thinks about that and they finally answer that question, we're able to move forward. And I'd like to kind of take the words of one of the candidates that ran for the 4th Congressional District. He was a Democratic candidate. And he said that racism is not a problem of people of color. It is a problem for white America to deal with. Because, if we just think rationally, if we take a look at how it is, this country was started by Caucasians. Whenever it was started, black people were property. They were considered no more than cattle. And a lot of black people in this country, we think about our ancestors. We take a look at ourselves. We're still striving to remove the stain from our whole culture. And we can never do that until we come meet together at the table, have a heart to heart, speak uncomfortable truths, shed some tears, embrace one another, and move forward. That's the only way it's going to happen.
That's very powerful to say that. And it's interesting, too, to talk about the role of government in supporting racism for a long time. One of the things that people, we're talking about Dr. King, and one of the most amazing pieces of nonviolent protest was the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. And the reason they were boycotting was because the bus required African Americans to sit in the back, which is crazy. And of course, people know the story of Rosa Parks refusing to sit in the back. But one of the things that comes out of that is that a peaceful protest, right, has an incredible impact. And it wasn't the bus company that was requiring people to sit in the back. It was the government of Montgomery, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
It was their Jim Crow laws that, because as the bus company found out immediately, African Americans were most of their customers. They were going bankrupt as soon as African Americans stopped traveling. So if it were up to the company, they probably wouldn't have had a policy. So as libertarians, you know, one of the things that we talk about when we think about Dr. King, we think about the fact that a lot of times the problem with the way government was running is that the people in power, if they were racists, made laws that were racist.
Yes.
And so we are looking at ways to say, let common sense guide our interactions rather than the idea that somebody should be able to legislate, right? Because there was a time, right? We were talking earlier off camera, and we talked about the strange fruit, or you know, the South, they used to refer to slavery as the peculiar institution.
Mm-hmm.
They had all these euphemisms that justified slavery to them morally. In fact, one of my favorite Bastiat quotes is that he talks about government and says, at some point in time, people who are in favor of living at the expense of somebody else through government create laws to support that and a moral code that glorifies it. Because at one point in time, the South said, oh yeah, slavery, we're doing them a favor. We're taking care of them.
Yeah.
Libertarians, that's something that we really stand against, right? We stand against the idea that government should ever be involved in something like that.
I think it's very important moving forward for the Libertarian Party as a whole to understand this, that African American people received their freedom, so to speak, by an act of government, because it was that same government that said they were 3/5 of a person.
Exactly.
And so you have to understand the thinking. And I hate to even sit here and say I'm speaking on behalf of all Black people. First, that's preposterous.
Right.
But just speaking on the history of things. So you have a people that it took an act of government, it took a civil war, and you know, the 13th Amendment to abolish slavery, except for punishment of a crime. And then you have all the Black codes that you know, just found a way to funnel African American you know, men to that form of slavery that had now been instituted. Then you fast forward to the civil rights movement, and you still have Black people seeking that equality through the works of Dr. King and other civil rights activists. And so we have to understand the social psychology of African American people when it comes to government. And you know, I joined the libertarian movement because I see that the relationship there between the government and the power hungry people of their time using the government as an arm to institute whatever belief they have, whether it be maladaptive or benevolent, but it's usually malicious and maladaptive. And so we have to find a way to reach the African American people to let them know that you can be who you want to be. You can seek your economic justice through this vehicle that we have here by limiting the government's influence. But also, we still have a battle when it comes to the social issue. And it's never going to go away until we deal with that. We can set up the government in such a way to hamstring it, or to give it the ability to execute justice, to administer justice, I should say.
It's interesting you say that, because the social aspect of it is something that I think people don't realize a lot. And so until very recently, I lived in Massachusetts, which, was really the home of the abolitionist movement. Massachusetts prides itself on, being a very progressive state. And if you ask most people in Massachusetts who live there, they'll say, oh, no, there's no racism in Massachusetts. But I was at a grocery store in northeastern Massachusetts, and in front of me, there was an older white man, and there were long lines at the checkout because there was a blizzard coming. In Massachusetts, everybody goes to the grocery store and buys bread and milk before a blizzard. And so he's standing in line, and the lady in front of him, big checkout counter, but there just aren't any other lines. He's waiting there, and he's grumbling and stuff like that. And then when that lady is finished, halfway through, they change tellers. And a young African-American man comes up, and he starts doing the checkout. The other woman goes off on her break. And this old man gets out of line and goes into a different line. And I'm like, oh my God. I was just stunned by that. And I spoke about it to a friend of mine who was African-American. He said, Dan, you're trying to do your best here, but I got to tell you, every African-American in the United States has had an experience like that. That's not just something random that happens. We always see that. We see a woman clutch her purse tighter if we get into an elevator. We see somebody cross the street to go on the other side, something like that. There are all these things that happen. And that systemic racism, where people don't even realize what's going on right now, that's something that, you're right, we can't fix something like that through government. We can only, if I can borrow a phrase from Dr. King, we fix that with the content of our character.
Yes.
So in that vein, I want to talk about character, and I want to talk about how in many ways civil rights was actually something that did great things for our character. I'm going to quote Dr. King from the letter from Birmingham jail and put it up on the screen here. One day the South will know that when these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were really, in reality, standing up for what is the best in the American dream and for the most sacred values in our Judeo-Christian heritage, thereby bringing our nation back to those great wells of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers, their formulation of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. I always think that's an amazing piece. And one of the things that astonished me the most about it is that Dr. King wrote it while he was in jail. Having spent a night in jail myself, I wasn't thinking, how do I change the world? I wasn't thinking, how do I make it better? I was focused on myself. So I wonder if you could talk about what he's talking about there, how in many ways the protest for civil rights was going back to the greatest things that the founding fathers wrote about.
Well, I've been watching a lot of medieval movies and TV shows here recently. And the last one I watched was about Lady Jane. And if you know, at that point in time in England's history, there was a struggle between Catholics and Protestants. And the church and the state were just married together. I mean, rock solid there. James, King James, he asked the Pope or one of the officials there with the Catholic Church if he could annul his marriage because he wasn't having any male heirs. And so what did he do? Well, I think we're going to join the Protestant movement here. And there was a bloody battle that was fought, and people were persecuted, people were burned at the stake, people were beheaded, and there were a lot of those ideas were fresh on the minds of the founders. Just 200 years separation, just about as much separation as we have today from the time this country was founded. So they had a clear idea of how brutal things were during those times for the sake of these monarchs and these power hungry people. And so they laid that foundation, and we're still struggling with it day to day for the ability in that First Amendment there to worship however you see fit, or don't, to stand up against the government whenever they are doing wrong things. There's no reason that an entire nation should get wrapped up into the marital spats of this king. And so anybody that studies history, you can take a look and see those little breadcrumbs that led up to the Constitution and the separation of powers, this idea that we have in our governance here. And I'd like to, say something a little bit more.
Please.
During my time as a missionary in Scotland, and I don't want to, make this into a caricature. I was working at a primary school, and I would take some of the children that were having trouble in class aside, and I would work with them one-on-one. And this one little boy, we'd sit and play chess together. He told me one day, "Oh, I'm not going to sit on no blue chair." And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "I'm a Celtic fan. I'm not no Rangers fan. Never sit on no blue chair." And he was just a little boy. He couldn't have been any more than 6 or 7. But over there in Scotland, the Rangers and Celtic are two famous football teams.
Yep.
As in soccer.
Yep. Yep.
And,
Queen's Park Rangers and I can't remember the Celtics, but yes, go on.
From my understanding, if you were Catholic, you were a fan of Celtic. If you Protestant, you were a fan of the Rangers. And so still to this day, there are remnants of this contention amongst Roman Catholics and Protestant. And so we don't understand how much animosity and struggle that we face with one another today are just things that have been passed down to us through the centuries. And until we understand history and understand how it affects one another, we can never fix our cultural and societal issues.
You bring up an outstanding point. I was talking about this the other day with on an earlier broadcast. As a chaplain in a prison, you are essentially a non-denominational minister because people need you. They need you. And you are the chaplain they get. I'm sure that they have other ministers of other faiths who come through, but there's times that, right, you probably ministered to Muslims or Jews or other religions, right?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And one of the things, right, I mean, there's many miracles in the United States, but one of the ones that astonishes me is that our religious tolerance here, and it's certainly not perfect, but we're better than anywhere else in the world, right? We have Catholics and Protestants and Baptists and Methodists and Jews and Hindus and Sikhs and Buddhists, Taoists, Shintoism. I can't think of any more religions off the top of my head, but we all live together in harmony, right? And everybody's got different rules, right? Orthodox Jews don't use electricity on Saturday. Catholics, I think it's all Catholics. Maybe it's just Roman Catholics don't eat meat on Fridays. Methodists don't drink alcohol. Methodists and Mormon don't drink alcohol at all. Mormons don't drink caffeinated beverages. We all have all these different rules. Nobody cares, right? Live by whatever rules you want to live by. And the idea that we might have an election, right? And let's just say, Catholics win and everybody's got to live by their rules. That's insane to Americans, right? It's insane that we would have this idea. But politically, that's exactly what we've done, right? We say, if the Democratic religion wins, I know I'm going to piss off some Democrats, so let me also say the Republican religion wins, whatever it is, that everybody has to live by those rules. And we're kind of coming up to that right now, right? The Democrats control everything in government except for the Supreme Court. And you see a lot of people afraid of what's going to happen because it's all Democrats right now. Now, you, as a person who ministers, especially in a prison, you know what happens when people are afraid. You know how powerfully that affects them. What do you tell people right now? And you said you have friends who are Trump supporters who are afraid about what the next 4 years are going to bring with the Democrats controlling everything.
Well, I'd like to clarify. I'm a former chaplain.
Okay.
I'm wearing this shirt here today. Because I ran on the criminal justice platform, and of course, what it stands for to be a chaplain. It's essentially affording people the opportunity to exercise their religion and provide a service so they can do that. And so, yes, there's been Wicca. There have been, Muslims I worked with extensively while I was in the prisons, and even Native American faiths as well. So, what I would say, is we need to be more tolerant. And just because you are tolerant, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to subscribe to that person's faith. You just have to not impose your belief on others through force. We can reason with one another. Of course, um, I'm a clergyman,
Sure.
and so I follow Jesus Christ, and that's who I am, and that's who I'll always be, and I'm always going to say that. But I do not try to force my belief on someone else, and so to those people, there's a particular pattern. And I hate painting people with broad strokes. There's a lot of people that are Trump supporters that happen to be in evangelical. That is the current, um, I would say, stereotype people use in regards to Trump supporters. And so the people that are evangelical and Trump supporters, their king is apparently Jesus Christ. And they have a different belief, eschatological belief, that one day he's going to come back and he's going to fix every single thing that is wrong with the world. We make things worse. We make it bad. The reason there's evil in this world is because we mess up. And what I would tell them, honestly, I would just tell them to, if you are an evangelical Christian, walk your faith. Don't just talk about it, walk it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a million lines that you can quote from the gospel. How can you see the mote in your brother's eye, past the plank in your own? And that's that's one that has always stuck out to me. And really tried to, even though I didn't grow up in the Christian universe. Actually, the Gospels were required reading at my temple. And one of the things that our rabbi said to us, like, look, these are rules that if everybody lived by them, we'd all be pretty happy, right? I mean, very simple things.
Yes.
So, talking, you said you're not working in the prison system anymore. However, I wanted to talk about one of the things that you saw, and there's a little bit of a side, but we had on Friday an activist on, Sarah Brooke Trubia, and she is the founder of the Emancipation Project. And what they focus on is finding African Americans who are in jail for crimes that are not illegal anymore. So mostly in states where marijuana has been legalized, people who were arrested for small marijuana crimes, but then because the justice system sort of biased, they end up in jail for a longer period of time. And one of the things that we had a conversation about, and this sort of ties around to what we were saying, that what you said earlier, when you're clarified, the 13th Amendment made slavery illegal except for
Commission of a crime.
Commission of a crime. The prison labor system is something that most Americans are not aware of how incredibly insidious it is. Can you talk about what most people don't know about how the prison labor system works?
Well, this is how it works at the farm.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people that are part of that, Arkansas Department of Corrections called Cummins. If you are a new commit, you have to work on whole squad, and they call new commits short hairs because a long time ago they used to shave the head of the incoming inmates, and they'd work on Ho Squad. The chain gang. They out there chopping that dirt, and there's a lot of agricultural, produce grown at Cummins Dairy Farm, beef herd. There's a swine herd out there. There's chicken houses. A lot of the milk is sold somewhere else. The beef is sent to Oklahoma, things like that. And then there's also a lot of other type of textile things that are also made. And the Board of Correction votes in December whether or not to give the inmates $6, all of them $6, for as a Christmas present, so to speak. So they don't get it all the time. Some of the times they do get it. It just depends on the Board of Corrections. So that's it. That's the only thing that they get if the family doesn't send them anything. And I guess I need to clarify, they also do give indigent inmates $10, $12 a month, but they have to prove that they have not had over $10 in their on their books for that month.
And so it's clear that these people, the work that they've done is worth much, much more than what they're getting paid.
Well, that is true. A lot of the work that they do, if we were paying, someone who was not guilty of a crime for the work that they were doing, it definitely would probably be over minimum wage for a lot of it.
Sure.
I'd also like to say this, and I've talked to someone on the phone not too recently about criminal justice reform. People always think that whenever someone talks about criminal justice reform, it's all about, oh, the inmate is the victim all the time. That's not the case. It's not an either or. We throw the book at people, hit them with the hammer, tough on crime. None of that reform or reformation of character that is in the mission statement of these Department of Corrections. Or it's all, oh, poor you just had a bad upbringing. That's what caused you to go shoot somebody and murder them. That may be the case, but that person has a responsibility. They made a choice to do what they did and take another human being's life. And there are some dangerous men in those prisons. I'm telling you. I'm telling you.
Right. Well, and I don't think anybody is arguing that there's not a need for prisons.
Yes.
That somebody's going to come in and wave a wand, and the truly there's no way around it, right? Truly evil people, they're not going to magically go away. We have to have a place to kill them. Most libertarians oppose the death penalty because, first of all, we've seen too many cases where police officers have lied to get convictions, but also because they don't want to give government the power to silence their critics by using the death penalty. Were you in a jail where people were potentially on death row?
Well, I didn't work at the death row, but I worked at the death house. Mm-hmm. And so, Varner and Cummins, they're right beside one another practically.
Gotcha.
So there's about 3,500, almost 4,000 inmates on those two units there in Grady, Arkansas. And so in 2017, Governor Hutchinson ordered the execution of 8 inmates, and we were going to do it in 11 days. So my job as a chaplain, I was assigned to make myself available to the victims' families during executions. And then during the day, I was just doing my normal duties as a chaplain. And of course, we were in contact with the families of those who had just been executed. So that was one of the wildest moments in my life, in a long list of wild moments. It was one of the first times that I had been involved in an incident where during the day I'm working, and then I come home or I look at some news, and the news is reporting something different from what happened. That
Wow.
was one of the first times that ever happened in my life. And of course, it made me suspicious of media. But it, as I said before, I was in the middle of two opposite forces or opposite sides. The family, the victim's family, and then the family of the condemned, and seeing how it plays out in their lives. Um, and so it's it is hard because I think even if one innocent person is executed, it's it's enough to not have the institution. Uh, and at the same time, I understand the argument of it being a deterrence, but it's really not doing much as a deterrence.
Well, it's interesting because there's a great economic show called Freakonomics, which I recommend to all of our listeners. You can find the podcast; it's superb, and they talked about the economics of punishment and how if you want punishment to be a deterrent, once you have something that is going to lead to the death penalty, there is no more deterrent. And people will say, well, you know what? I'm going to get the death penalty, so I might as well commit all these other crimes as well,
Yeah,
because it all adds up to it. In fact, I said, if we had the death penalty for burglary, most burglars would say, well, you know what? I'm going to kill these people anyway, because then they can't testify, and I'm going to get the death penalty anyway if I get caught. So, the death penalty as a deterrent is a crazy idea. It's not like life in jail is any sort of a picnic. But I want to do a little station identification. You are listening to us here on the Liberty Lunch Power Hour, brought to you by the People for Liberty. My name is Dan Fishman, and my special guest today is Ricky Dale Harrington. Ricky, we got a question that came in from the audience, and I thought we were going to say this till later, but it's so appropriate right now. Somebody wants to know if you are considering running again in 22, and I will, Andrea, thank you, Andrea. I want to generify that. Are you considering running for any office anytime soon?
yes, I will be running for governor of Arkansas in 2022.
Wow. Wow. Now that is a big race. I mean, Senate is also statewide. Uh, so tell me this, what are your signature requirements going to be? Do you know already? Do you get to automatically run, or
10,000.
10,000? So you got to start now, right? I mean, you got to start collecting money, because knowing the Libertarian Party and Arkansas and stuff like that, Andrea is very excited that you're running again. Thank you, Andrea. Knowing that you need 10,000 signatures and knowing the ballot access requirements that are slanted against libertarians, how soon are you going to start fundraising? How soon are you going to start trying to get things going for 2022?
Well, probably about the middle of February, end of February, um, we'll be getting things ironed out and ready to go full tilt boogie and trying to win this race, because that's what I want to do. I want to win this race. I'm not doing this to for some vainglorious um, endeavor. I have a mission.
Yep.
It's dedicated to the people of Arkansas, and definitely working for all the people of Arkansas, not just those who agree with me for one because we're libertarians, or be some libertarian only governor, but a governor for all the people of Arkansas, and try to find a way to bring compromise back into our political discourse. Because as you said earlier, there are people that are afraid that we're going to be in turmoil these next 4 years because the Democrats have a trifecta now. Or the way politics is played in Arkansas, and they've had trifecta for almost 8 years now.
Right.
And so, there's a lot of people who need services or have valid complaints that are not being heard in Arkansas. And so I just want to continue on the mission of coalition governance.
Asa Hutchinson is the governor there now, right?
Yes, sir.
And tell me how many votes you got in 2020?
We got
for your Senate race, just roughly.
Almost 400,000. We were just a couple of hundred short from 400,000.
And see, that is especially interesting to me because Asa Hutchinson only got 582,000 votes when he was elected.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think that there are 400,000 people out there who pulled the ticket in a two-way race for Ricky Dale Harrington Jr., and you only got to get to 500,000 to win, you're pretty close. You've got name recognition in the state. I think this is going to be a very exciting race. I'm really excited to hear about this, Ricky, because I think that you represent the libertarian ideal extremely well. But I'm excited for Arkansas because so I grew up in Galveston, Texas. My uncle lived in Russell. He actually was the head of the ACLU in Arkansas for many years. He was there. He was there when Bill Clinton was governor. And during that time was when Arkansas banned the showing of The Last Temptation of Christ, which, for the ACLU, that's just a home run. Government doesn't get to tell a movie theater what movies they're not going to show.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things was, sort of seeing where Arkansas was. You sort of had, it is fascinating to see the change in our politics, right? To see, a progressive Democrat like Bill Clinton be the most popular person by a mile in the state of Arkansas, but a Democrat. And now, right, Republicans have dominated Arkansas politics for such a long period of time. Getting that third voice in there is going to be critical. Do you have any thoughts about it's? Can Hutchinson run again, or is he term limited out?
I believe he's term limited out.
So it's going to be an open seat. So that makes it even more exciting for a libertarian to get in. You're not running against an incumbent. So that's great. So I'm guessing we should, so one of the things that people should do right now, let me put up what the Twitter is. Oh, wait, are you going to have a new Twitter? Because right now you're Ricky for Senate.
Yes, I'll be changing that a little later on.
All right.
Right now you can find me at Ricky for Senate.
All right, that's good. So people should follow at Ricky for Senate because we want people to know when that announcement happens. And I think you can change your handle on Twitter. I don't know if that's true or not, but that'll be a good thing. So when you start running, it's going to be a big deal. Now, I remember that when you were running, they said that Arkansas has never elected an African-American to the Senate. I'm guessing they've never had an African-American governor either.
They've not had an African-American governor either. And I was the first candidate on the ballot that was an African-American as well in Arkansas.
Wow. So no black person had ever run for Senate. That is astonishing. Mm-hmm. Now, so obviously we want people to get behind you. We want people to get into the race. I don't want to lose track of the fact that today is also Martin Luther King Day. And, we played a little bit from the I've been to the mountaintop speech, but perhaps the more famous speech, the one that everybody knows, is the I Have a Dream speech. And he talks about seeing a day when everybody ends up working together. Now, we've had an African-American president, and a lot of people think that means it's over. We don't have to fight for equality anymore because we got there. Let's talk about how that's not one African-American president doesn't end racism.
I'd like to, I don't know if this was someone misquoting McConnell or not, whenever people were talking about reparations. And he was saying, well, Black Americans have got their reparations because Obama was elected. And I don't know what he was thinking whenever he said that. Um,
It's interesting because, one of the things that, as a libertarian, I'm not a huge fan of a Republican or Democrat, but I remember well that something President Obama did, and I'm going to play a little clip of it because I thought it was one of the most amazing, unifying things I'd ever seen anybody do. And so, people are going to be mad that I play a clip of President Obama on a Republican show, but I think it's important because, it shows what we're talking about here. So let me share this up.
Amazing grace. Amazing grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
So I don't want to cut the president off, but we're running a little bit out of time. But that moment, right, where he starts singing and people stand up, that's a unifying moment, right? There's no divisiveness there. There's no, oh, this is a black church or anything like that. That's everybody recognizing that grace, this idea, is bigger than black or white. And the president's doing that in the light of, right, this incredible tragedy that happened where I'm going to call him a domestic terrorist, went into a largely African-American church and killed 9 people.
mhm.
And here is the president trying to unite people, trying to bring everybody together. You're running for governor with that idea, right? You want to say, we can be more united. And I got to ask you, are you somebody who looks at how separated we are now in the light of Dr. King's vision and are worried that there are forces that are trying to still pull us apart?
Those forces, they will always be there. But the thing of it is how much oxygen are we going to give those voices? And really, it all comes down to one simple thing: commitment. A commitment to truth, a commitment to justice, and a commitment to value the human dignity that we are all born with in its various shapes, colors, ethnic backgrounds, as well as the struggles that we have to deal with personally. We need to find a way to stop maximizing the faults of others and minimizing our own. We have to find a way to truly love people the way that we ourselves want to be loved and recognize that people don't always share love in the way that we choose to receive it. And in order to do that, we have to set aside time to truly understand our fellow man and woman, our fellow human being.
It's beautiful. I'm going to play one more clip. So this one's for the kids out there. Somebody took Dr. King's I've Been to the Mountaintop speech, put music behind it, and auto-tuned it. And I have just always found this an incredibly powerful piece. So let me pop this and then I'll come back in and we'll say our goodbyes and end the show. But let's show this first.
Let us rise up tonight with a greater readiness. Let us stand with a greater determination. Let us move on in these powerful these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing anything. Our eyes have seen the glory of the Lord. 1960, students all over the South started sitting in at Mud's house. And I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream, and taking the whole nation back to those great realms of democracy, which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing anything. Our eyes have seen the glory of the Lord. 1962, the Negroes in Albany, Georgia, decided to straighten their backs up. And whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere, because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. 1963, black people in Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation, brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. Later that year in August, I would try to tell America about a dream that I had. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing anything. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
That one just always amazes me. The idea when he promises that we as a people will get to the promised land. It only happens through hard work. Getting ready to run for office again. You ran for office before. You are a guy who has worked. You have worked to help that dream become a reality. I want to give you the last minute. You want to tell people not to despair. You want to tell people the country's going to be okay. You want to tell people they got to work. Pick any one of those things or anything else that you want to say. What's your message to the people who are tuning in right now?
Well, my message to the people, especially on this day, to commemorate a great American who persevered to the very end, who, even though dealing with threats against his life, bombing attempts on his house, his family in danger, he was committed to the actualization of the American dream. And it's going to take all of us in order to do that, and to realize that you don't have to force someone. You don't have to use your power to feel comfortable in yourself, to have the things that you want for your family. I love America. And just because the ideas that I have, or the ideas that Dr. King had during the time, wasn't popular. When someone says, when y'all protest, why can't you be like Dr. King was? You have to remember that Dr. King spent time in jail. They sicked the dogs on Dr. King. Used water hoses to blast them. There was used the police officers to corral them up, beat them. if we are to commit to these ideals, it's going to take some perseverance on our part. It's not going to be this microwave culture that we have right now that, we can send a tweet and then all these problems are over with. It's not going to be that. It's going to take all of us working and walking hand in hand, committed to this one idea that this nation is a nation built on liberty. That we, all of us, should be free from oppression, free from government oppression, free from economic oppression, free from cultural and social oppression. And we have to understand and recognize the imago Dei, the dignity imbued with every human being.
That's wonderful. My name is Dan Fishman. This is the Liberty Lunch Power Hour brought to you by the People for Liberty. My guest this last hour has been Ricky Dale Harrington Jr., candidate for governor in Arkansas. You can follow him right now at Ricky for Senate on Twitter and expect an announcement of a new Twitter name, his campaign, all of those things. And my wish for everybody on this day where we remember Dr. King is Dr. King's wish for us all. Peace.